Hey everyone, this is the Caddy I made for my Ego batteries. I had previously posted a build video, but this one includes a free set of plans and some explanation. I designed this project in SketchUp. If you haven't tried SketchUp, I highly recommend giving it a try. I was pretty hesitant at first. I like drawing my plans out on paper or really just like winging it, but SketchUp has helped me be much more efficient with my time and materials. I started out with ripping some scrap plywood to 6 3/4 of an inch wide. This will work for the sides and leave me 2 smaller pieces that I will cut to size for the dividers. Then I brought those pieces over to the miter saw and cut everything to length. Since the sides are 6 3/4 of an inch tall, with a base that takes up 3/4 of an inch, the total depth is 6 inches. That leaves enough of the battery sticking up that your fingers can't easily grab them without jamming into the wood or having it so tight you can't get your fingers in at all. Next, I cut another scrap piece of plywood to 14 3/4 and then cross-cut this piece to 9 3/4 for the base and 10 1/2 for the handle. It's a good tip if you're just starting out to try and set your table saw fence once and cut all the pieces that will be that length in one go. You can see here how I have drawn out the handle. I like to drill 2 1-inch holes centered 3 inches apart, which makes the final opening 1 by 4 inches. Making the cut from one hole to the next is always a bit of a pain. Since this is plywood and not overly critical, I went with my jigsaw, but if it was hardwood and I wanted a very precise look, I would probably have used my scroll saw. I've been thinking about making a jig for my router, but I just haven't yet, and a template with a pattern flush trim bit would probably be the best option eventually, and I'll probably make one. The rest of the cutting was much easier since I could use my bandsaw. I actually got this bandsaw from Sears right before Craftsman got picked up by Lowe's. It was a good price, but I was never overly happy with it. You can see how the blade would leave bad burn marks. It isn't in this video, but I got an aftermarket blade off Amazon for 10 bucks. Actually, it was $19 because it's not Prime. You had to pay $9 for the shipping. But for less than 20 bucks, I got a brand new blade, and it does not leave burn marks now. I actually cut like 2-inch cherry curves, no burn marks. I'll make sure to include a link for that blade up in the description. So after I was finished at the bandsaw, I went over and sanded everything nice and smooth. This is actually a good reason why I do 1 inch for that handle. I can fit it over that spindle. I guess if I did a little bigger, I might not even need to take off the knob. But after it was smooth, I did a 1/4 inch round over, and I only did the round over on the parts of the handle that stick up out of the caddy. I didn't want to round over any of the other edges because I want to have as much of a gluable surface as possible. I mean, I've done it before, but you guys have too. You kind of get round over crazy and you round over all the edges, and then you start to assemble your pieces, and then you have these little almost like triangular cut-ins where 2 different roundovers meet, when really they should just be like a flush flat surface. So last step before assembly with this project was just to sand off any burrs or splinters. I just do it by hand real quick. I didn't want to get too aggressive and use one of my tools, because then all of a sudden you'd have that same problem you would get if you were doing your roundovers. So a project like this, I kind of want to assemble it quickly, and I'm not overly concerned with the cosmetic look of a screw head or nails popping out. Ultimately, the glue is what's going to give it all of its strength. So I put glue, and I use my Ryobi Airstrike to put in some brads. If you don't have one of these cordless nailers, whatever brand you're into, go for it, because it makes life so much easier. There's times I would just never have gotten out my brad nailer because I would also have to get my air compressor out, and since half the time I'm doing any of this kind of work, my kids are asleep, the air compressor just can't be used. So this is great, and I use it all the time now. I use it for more things than I ever thought I would. So here you can see me, pretty good little trick. I'm using the divider as a spacer on either side. Even though it's only going to be one divider on each side, it acts like a support because it matches what the center actually is. Let me mark and put the glue in before I went back and use the brad nailer to secure it. Getting the handle placed correctly was probably the toughest part of the assembly, but it wasn't overly hard since I was using brads. This is a pretty enjoyable project. I like working with this kind of plywood. I think it's called blonde plywood. It's smooth, it cuts well, and it looks good. And it's definitely better than like chipboard, and it doesn't have the tendency to splinter like an oak veneered plywood might. I would recommend picking it up for like this type of project. Before we get to the end of the video, I want to thank you for watching and ask if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe. My goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers, and right now the channel is at 660. So at this point, I have the Caddy all assembled using brads and glue, and I decided to go back and to use screws to tighten all the major joints up. In this case, I view the screws as an alternative to clamping. Ultimately, they will give the Caddy some extra strength, so there wasn't any harm in putting them in, but it's easier and faster for me to put some screws in than to pull out all my clamps and to wait to use this until everything's dry on its own. So let me know if you decide to make this and if you use my plans how they were. I originally hadn't thought to include them, but I figured maybe somebody would find them useful. And just to touch on the Ego stuff, I have the first snowblower, it's the single stage one that you have to manually push, and the lawnmower. So I use these batteries year round. I like using the Caddy because I can bring my batteries up from the basement or out to my garage or my shed. So I found it really useful. Thanks for watching, and good luck with all your projects.